Hi, this is Paul, and I wanted to make note of an article that appeared. A friend of mine sent it to me this morning from the Chronicle of Higher Education on Jordan Peterson. I thought it was a fairly balanced article. I'm not quite sure if the title matches the article or if that's more clickbait, but it was a fairly good piece. I think the article connects with the reality that to figure out Peterson's thought and to understand it kind of all the way down to the roots, which is what I've been digging at for the last few months, is not an easy thing. So there's kind of like level one Peterson, which is, pronoun Peterson. Then there's kind of level two Peterson, which is, okay, now we're trying to understand his agendas in terms of his political agenda and his academic agenda. And then there's kind of level three Peterson, where you're beginning to see a little bit higher resolution and understanding some of the debates he's getting into and some of his sources in terms of Jung. And I think that's kind of where this article is at. And I'm working on getting from level 3 to level 4 to understanding more deeply when he says that Richard Dawkins is a Newtonian and not a Darwinist. And so it's at that level that I'm working at right now. But I thought the article was worthwhile reading. I thought it seemed fair and fairly well balanced. And it also helped me realize again the difference in written media versus YouTube. And I really do think that Peterson has made a splash because of YouTube. In some ways, this medium is it fits him and this project in a way that print media doesn't, which is why he's got more YouTube followers than Twitter followers. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with his book when it's out. And so we'll see whether things can kind of cross mediums in how they work. And again, someone mentioned, yeah, you're hitting this book hard. Well, this book is really helpful in terms of figuring out this medium slash message dynamic. And I think Peterson himself is a very interesting test case in this, because I think it's there's a medium connection here, and I don't know if Peterson would be having the splash or the impact he has without YouTube. But that leads me to a comment that I made in one of my earlier videos, that without individuals, nothing happens, but without institutions, nothing lasts. And I think about that often with respect to Peterson, because the questions are going to be, okay, he's making a splash now. Will he continue to be an enduring voice in the culture? It's too early to know. Will some of his ideas have impact in institutions or become institutionalized to the degrees that they can go on in other centuries? There's an interesting comment in this book, an interesting place in this book. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I found the quote, and I'll read it. This is from Amusing Ourselves to Death, and it highlights the difference between the spoken word and the written word. This is where I'll have to back up a little bit. Someone is a candidate is working towards an academic degree, and you are not a journalist, one professor remarks. You are supposed to be a scholar. Let's go back. In the case I have in mind, the issue of what is legitimate form of truth-telling was raised to a level of consciousness rarely achieved. The candidate had included in his thesis a footnote intended as documentation of a quotation, which reads, told to the investigator at the Roosevelt Hotel, January 18, 1981, in the presence of Arthur Lingemann and Gerald Gross. The citation drew attention of no fewer than 4 or 5 of the oral examiners, all of whom had observed that it was hardly suitable form of documentation, and that it ought to be replaced by a citation from a book or an article. You are not a journalist, one professor remarked. You are supposed to be a scholar. Perhaps because the candidate knew of no published statement of what he was told at the Roosevelt Hotel, he defended himself vigorously on the grounds that there were witnesses to what he was told, that they were available to attest to the accuracy of the quotation, and that the form in which an idea is conveyed is irrelevant to its truth. Carried away on the wings of his eloquence, the candidate argued further that there are more than 300 references to published works in his thesis, and that it was extremely unlikely that any of them would be checked for accuracy by the examiners, by which he meant to raise the question, why would you assume the accuracy of a print reference citation but not a speech referenced one? The answer he received took the following line: "You are mistaken in believing that the form in which an idea is conveyed is irrelevant to its truth. In the academic world, the published word is invested with greater prestige and authenticity than the spoken word. What people say is assumed to be more casually uttered than what they write. The written word is assumed to have been reflected upon and revised by its author, reviewed by authorities and editors. It is easier to verify or refute, and it is invested with an impersonal and objective character, which is why, no doubt, you have referred to yourself in this thesis as the investigator, and not by your name. That is to say, the written word is, by its nature, addressed to the world, not an individual. The written word endures, the spoken word disappears, and that is why writing is closer to the truth than speaking. Moreover, we are sure you would prefer that this commission produce a written statement that you have passed your examination, should you do so, than for us to merely tell you that you have and leave it at that. Our written statement would represent the truth. An oral agreement would be only a rumor." The candidate wisely said no more in the matter except to indicate that he would make whatever changes the commission suggested, and that he profoundly wished that he would pass his oral, that should he pass the oral, a written document would attest to that fact. He did pass, and in time the proper words were written. And you can see why perhaps Postman's book comes up again and again for me as I process Peterson. And part of it is because, again, technology is disrupting and changing. You know, the blog, when news blogs first started being published, they were compared to, say, New York Times or Newsweek or Time, magazines now having in many ways kind of passed by the wayside. And so then we processed, well, how do we evaluate the words of a blog versus the words of the New York Times? And now with cable news, you have the proliferation of television, but now with YouTube, we have something different. And so what does it mean that Peterson is a star on YouTube while his Maps of Meaning book went nowhere? I don't really think we have any idea what this means or what this will mean going on into the future. And for me as a preacher whose primary task is speaking, I do a little bit of writing on my blog and so on and so forth, but I have not published a book. And so I weigh these questions because, technology is changing all of this. And so this attestation in Postman on these different dynamics kind of haunts me as I listen to YouTubes, and I'm making some myself and trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean? What is important? And then getting into these other things about truth. So, for example, if you say that truth lies in the written word and you can come back to it, you then have to say, well, what do we mean by truth? I mean, for example, how Platonic is that theory? So, these are the questions that rumble around. But anyway, take a look at the article in the Chronicle of Higher Education and let me know what you think. Leave a comment in the comment section. And thanks for watching.